Hello, this is Stephanie, and this is Talk Tales and Trivia, the show where I talk about society, culture, pop culture, and I throw in a little bit of trivia too, so that you can stump your family and friends. It is so cool and a lot of fun. If you are a new listener here at Talk Tales and Trivia, I want to welcome you, and thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you enjoy this episode. So now everybody sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode on Times Square in New York City from the 1980s to the present. Well, if you haven't been, I will make sure that you feel like you have. I hope that you enjoy this episode. You know, New York City is fantastic, and I love it. A matter of fact, I have been there many times, and I used to live there, as I will tell you in this episode. But I also want to tell you that it was in the late 70s and 80s and into the 90s that New York City started to lose its attraction. It started to lose the people that came to visit, and it started to be a real dumpster. People didn't want to visit New York anymore, and so it was. The governors, the mayors, and the police commissioners started to take back New York City, rebuild New York City, one step at a time, starting with Times Square. In 1988, I moved to Murray Hill in New York City. I lived in a 3-story walk-up between 1st and 2nd Avenue on 31st Street. Not exactly prime real estate, but safe enough. It was near the United Nations and right above the entrance to the Queens Midtown Tunnel. Now you know. If you are a New Yorker or visited New York, you know exactly where I lived. Then, a couple of years later, I found myself living in the Salvation Army apartment building for women. It was ideal. It served 2 meals a day, and it was right across the street from the much coveted Gramercy Park, the oh so glamorous. And it was a close walk to 18th Street between 5th and 6th Avenues where I worked. I thought it was a dream come true, and it was. I never really ventured to the west side, past 6th Avenue, or anywhere near Times Square. Well, that's what we're talking about today, is Times Square in New York City. Everything I needed was right around where I lived. But Times Square was unmistakably a major part of the city. No doubt a black eye on the city, a disappointment to the dwellers of Manhattan, and somewhere that was to be avoided if you wanted to dodge trouble, darkness, shady dealings, and drugs. If you have seen the 2019 movie Joker with Joaquin Phoenix, P.S. and by the way, I suggest that, you might have an idea of the area in New York City that was the seedy and trashy Times Square. The closest thing I can compare it to is the scenes in the movie Joker. To find a seedier place was difficult when they were filming the movie, and Times Square didn't look like it does today. So in the 2019 movie Joker, with no seedy place to replicate Times Square, really, the producers of the movie had to go to Newark, New Jersey, a real old-fashioned pit hole if ever there was one. The Newark that was of the same time frame as the movie, never fixed up and never given a real chance to survive in today's society. It's a real shame. But it depicts it perfectly. Times Square, where beauty came to die. No kidding. In 1986, when I was there were multiple pornographic theaters in Times Square. The Motion Picture Association of America introduced its rating system that included an X rating that became associated with pornography. And so all the movies that were in Times Square were X-rated, or the dreaded triple X. And everything was pornography back then. Pornography and, I should say, drugs. The Times Square as a porn capital era was part of New York City's decline in the 70s and 80s amid its fiscal crisis and later the crack cocaine epidemic, which was rampant. And it wasn't until the mid-1980s that there was a push to clean up Times Square and New York City more broadly. Ed Koch, who served as mayor from 1978 to 1989, tried to launch an architecture's dream, a Philip Johnson-designed building project that ended up, unfortunately, falling through. Quick side note here for those Philip Johnson lovers out there. The Philip Johnson estate recently has had much success with his trending glass house that's in New Canaan, Connecticut, an easy train ride on Metro North. With tours of the structure trending, scheduling and waiting lists are required. But New York was moving on to better things. And as mayor, Rudy Giuliani, who I'm sure you know about now, was mayor from 1994 to 2001. The revitalization of Times Square was beginning to change for real. And thankfully, the pornography industry was changing too. There was definitely a shift that happened in the Giuliani years, and that was great for New York. It was that there was a kind of structural shift in the pornography industry because of the development of, guess what? Home video and this thing called the internet? What is that? And so the porno theaters and seediness of Times Square quickly became a thing of the past. Thankfully, after all, it was a very old-fashioned idea dating back to the 1960s and 70s, whose time had come and thankfully gone. It sounds almost quaint now that anyone can call up pornography on their computers or phones. The idea of going to a theater in public just sounds hopelessly out of date, not to mention germ-ridden and unhealthy in this day and age. It was only when Times Square began to take a turn for the better that Michael Eisner, who served as the chairman of the Walt Disney Company, that was actually looking to create live theater productions of the company's animated films. And where was he looking to do this? Where else but Times Square? Beauty and the Beast made it to the Palace Theater in 1994. And in 1995, Disney began leasing the new Amsterdam Theater on 42nd Street between 7th and 8th Avenues. I wasn't scared anymore. But still, there was a sizable amount of crime even then. Even though the Times Square area counted 60 felonies in 1995, it was a notable decline from the 2,300 it accumulated in 1984. So it was really improving. And one city official at that time said that crime has reached such a low level on 42nd Street between 7th and 8th Avenues, and that's the worst block in the city, that we don't keep statistics anymore. There's no need to. And it is noted that most resources acknowledge almost everybody recently celebrates Times Square's revival as one of New York City's greatest recent success stories. And isn't that the truth? Remember, it was only a short while ago that it was, sleazy, blighted, and crime-ridden. Nowadays, it is mostly crime-free. It has driven out the prostitutes and the pornographers who made it so seedy. And it bustles with tourists by day and night. And world-spanning corporations such as AMC, Disney, and Viacom prosper within it. But if everyone knows about Times Square's remarkable comeback, few understand what made it happen. While the original building project remained stalled, something surprising happened. Times Square started to have a real revival. First, it was a trickle of activity. In 1990, Viacom, the huge entertainment firm that owns Nickelodeon and MTV, I'm sure you know that, signed a lease at 1515 Broadway. In 1992, the publishing giant Bertelsmann AG bought 1540 Broadway from Citicorp. In 1993, the Morgan Stanley investment firm purchased 1585 Broadway from Solomon Equities. Then, the small trickle became a flood. And it really was a flood on the last day of Mayor David Dinkins' administration in 1993. By the way, P.S., he was not a great mayor. The Walt Disney Company signed a memo of understanding with the city to refurbish and reopen the new Amsterdam Theater that was in Times Square. In 1995, AMC, the entertainment conglomerate, agreed to move to the neighborhood. That was great. And Madame Tussauds Wax Museum decided to open a Times Square branch to join its famous London counterpart. And then, as if that wasn't enough, the Tishman Urban Development Corporation contracted to build a big hotel. And the Durst organization announced that it would erect a 1.5 million square foot office building, taking over 1/4 of the site originally intended for Times Square Center. As many recent New York City tourists can see, Times Square is no longer a frightening place. It's not. It seems hard to even believe that such a place has made a huge transformation from an area in the city to be avoided to a fantastic, and I do mean really great, tourist attraction with some wonderful sights to see. Restaurants, bars, and sightseeing abound as one of the major stops in many tours of New York City. We, New Yorkers, have seen the year-to-year changes of Times Square, but even those that have never been to New York City have seen glimpses of changes as well. A perfect example is Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve, the annual New Year's Eve television special broadcast by ABC. The special broadcasts primarily are from New York City's Times Square and prominently features coverage of its annual ball drop event. It's quite a sight, along with live and pre-recorded musical performances by popular musicians. You don't want to miss it, all from Times Square. Looking around Times Square, it's hard to believe this was ever a scary, dirty, disgusting den of iniquity. Now Times Square is full of life and promise of a city that was destined to become a delight for people of all ages. Now, we can only wait for the time when it is full of life again, without the scare of a pandemic. This is just a little glimpse of Times Square and this episode. If you want to know more, go to the show notes where I will have links to all of the things that I spoke about regarding Times Square. I hope that you enjoy that as well. If you have enjoyed this episode of Talk Tales and Trivia, that's great. I love it. Go to talktales.trivia.com to get to all my episodes, my social media links, and there's a little bio on me if you're wondering what I'm all about. If you've enjoyed Talk Tales and Trivia, you may very well enjoy Growing Uncomfortable. Go to growinguncomfortable.com to get to all my episodes, my social media links, and that little bio is there if you're wondering what I'm all about. You can email me at talktalesandtrivia@gmail.com and growinguncomfortable@gmail.com. One more thing I have to tell you is that you can subscribe for free. Subscribing gives you the notifications of when new episodes come out, and that is so cool, and that's what I want for you. Listen, I got to get out of here. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode of Talk Tales and Trivia, and I will see you next time. Okay, bye-bye.